Nobody remembered Ethan Cole's name on the first day of school. Not the homeroom teacher, who called out every name on her list and moved past his twice. Not the students who bumped into him in the hallway and said sorry to the wall behind him. Not even the lunch staff, who handed him a tray and looked right through him as if he were made of air. He did not mind, that was the point. Ethan had chosen the last desk in every classroom. He wore faded gray shirts and worn shoes with a small crack along the left sole. He walked slowly, kept his shoulders low, and never made eye contact for more than a second. He had perfected the art of being forgotten. 3 years at Crestwood Academy, and he had become the school's most invisible person. The boy no one noticed, the student no one challenged, the name no one bothered to learn. He was also the most powerful being alive, but no one knew that part. Crestwood Academy sat on the edge of the mountains in the Pacific Northwest, where the pine trees grew so tall they blocked the winter sun by mid-afternoon. On the surface, it looked like any other elite boarding school: marble floors, old trophies in glass cases, students in pressed uniforms moving between classes with purpose and ambition. But beneath the surface, Crestwood was something else entirely. It was a school built for two worlds at once. Half the students were ordinary teenagers, studying mathematics and literature and history. The other half were werewolves, young men and women learning to live alongside humans without ever revealing what they were. The school's founders had believed that integration was possible, that the two worlds could share the same hallways and cafeteria tables without disaster. The teachers monitored aura levels. The lower gymnasium had a hidden floor. The student hierarchy followed both grade point averages and pack rankings, and everyone understood which of the two mattered more. In a school full of wolves, being weak was dangerous. Ethan Cole was, according to every official record, the weakest student Crestwood had ever enrolled. His aura reading sat at level 1, the supernatural equivalent of having almost no power at all. He failed every combat assessment. He could not hold a shift for more than 3 seconds during the tests where shifting was required. He flinched when other students raised their voices too loudly. His file was thin, unremarkable, and filed at the very back of the cabinet in the guidance office, behind students who actually mattered. Every single one of those records was a lie he had carefully built. The trouble, when it came, always wore the same face. Drake Vance was the kind of person who took up space on purpose. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved through the school as if the hallways had been built specifically for him. He was the alpha heir of the most dominant pack at Crestwood, which meant that in the real hierarchy of the school, not the one the principal talked about at assemblies, but the one that actually ran things, Drake was at the top. He had a circle of loyal friends who laughed at his jokes a half-second before they were actually funny, and he had a habit of finding the weakest person in any room and making sure they knew their place. That person, this year, was Ethan. It started small. A shoulder bump in the corridor that was not an accident. A chair scraped away just as Ethan was about to sit. Comments made just loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. Drake had tried all of it, and none of it had produced the reaction he wanted. Ethan never flushed with embarrassment. He never looked away fast, or stuttered, or hunched his shoulders any lower than they already were. He absorbed everything with the patience of someone who had simply decided that none of it was worth responding to. This, more than anything, made Drake furious. On a Wednesday in October, Drake found Ethan in the corridor outside the science wing and spilled an entire tray of food, rice, a cup of soup, a carton of juice, directly onto Ethan's shoes and the lower half of his trousers. He did it with a grin, surrounded by 6 of his friends, in front of at least 20 students who had slowed their walking to watch. "Sorry about that," Drake said, not sounding sorry at all. "Didn't see you there. Easy to miss, I guess." The corridor went quiet. Everyone waited. Ethan looked down at his shoes. He looked back up at Drake. His expression did not change. There was no anger in his face, no hurt, no embarrassment. He looked at Drake the way a person looks at rain, acknowledging it, not bothered by it, already thinking about something else entirely. "It's fine," Ethan said simply, and then he stepped around Drake and walked away. The crowd did not know what to do with that. Some of them laughed, nervous laughter that was really just the release of tension. Drake's jaw tightened. A few students turned back to their conversations. One girl, standing near the far wall with her arms crossed and her lunch bag hanging from one hand, did not laugh. She watched Ethan walk away and felt a strange, quiet certainty that she had just missed something important. Her name was Serena Voss, and she was almost always right about things like that. Serena was the kind of person Drake respected, and most students admired, and almost no one actually knew. She was the senior class president, the daughter of the regional beta, and sharp in a way that had nothing to do with grades. She read people the way other people read books, quickly, thoroughly, and between the lines. She had been assigned to monitor Ethan by two of her teachers, who suspected he might be a security risk, a weak student, in an environment that did not tolerate weakness without consequence. She had expected to find someone frightened, someone barely holding it together. She had not expected to find someone like him. They were paired together for a history project 2 days after the corridor incident, and they met in the library on a Thursday evening when most other students were at the weekly pack social in the common room. Serena arrived 3 minutes early. Ethan was already there, seated with a book open in front of him that was not the history textbook. He closed it when she sat down, and she caught the title before he did. Not a school text, not a novel, but a dense, worn volume on territorial law and council agreements. The kind of book a student had no reason to own. Interesting reading for a history project, she said. I read widely, he said. She tried, over the next hour, to get something real out of him. Not in an obvious way. She was too careful for that. She worked it into the conversation naturally, asking small questions, steering toward personal territory with the ease of someone who had done it many times. And every single time, she hit a wall. Not a rude wall, not a hostile wall, but a smooth, clean, total wall. The kind that told her the person on the other side had put it there on purpose and knew exactly where every door was and had chosen not to open any of them. She went home that night and sat on her bed for a long time, thinking. She had read hundreds of people. She had never hit a wall like that before. What no one at Crestwood knew, what no one in a 1,000-mile radius knew, was that Ethan Cole was not a student hiding from the world. He was a king hiding in it. The title of Alpha King was not inherited like a family name or given like a certificate. It was earned through something called the Trial of Souls, a test that had ended the lives of every candidate who had attempted it in the past 2 centuries. Ethan had entered the trial at 14, alone, in the deepest chamber of the old council grounds, and he had walked out 3 days later, while 4 senior council members stood outside the door, with their hands pressed flat against the stone, kneeling, without having made a decision to kneel. His aura, at full strength, did not read on any instrument the council owned. It simply broke them. He was the Alpha King, sovereign over every wolf pack on the continent, the most powerful supernatural being alive. And he was here, in a school, wearing cracked shoes and failing combat class on purpose, because 3 years ago his intelligence network had identified a convergence point beneath Crestwood Academy, a supernatural ley line, a vein of raw ancient energy running under the mountain, and someone was slowly, carefully corrupting it. If the corruption completed, it would send a psychic shockwave through every supernatural being within range, exposing them all to the human world in a single, uncontrollable moment. The integration that Crestwood had been built to protect would collapse overnight. Ethan had come to stop it. Quietly, without starting a war, without alerting the faction behind the plan that the Alpha King himself was watching. The only person who knew he was here was Marcus, a former royal general, now working as a groundskeeper at Crestwood, communicating with Ethan through handwritten notes, left in a hollow oak tree on the east lawn. Every few days, Ethan would check the oak. Every few days, Marcus would reply. The night after his library session with Serena, Ethan found a new note waiting. It read, "The second operative has made contact with the Chancellor. The timeline has moved up. You have less time than we thought." Ethan folded the note carefully, slid it into his pocket, and stood in the dark beneath the oak for a moment, his eyes on the school building. Somewhere beneath those walls, someone was finishing what they had started. He could feel the ley line from here, a low, wrong vibration in the earth, like a heartbeat that had lost its rhythm. He needed to move faster. 4 nights later, Serena followed him. She had not planned to. She had been walking back from a late study session and seen him crossing the east lawn in the direction no student had any reason to go after dark. Toward the maintenance buildings, the old trees, the edge of the property where the groundskeeper kept his tools and his silence. Something in the way Ethan moved stopped her. He was not walking the way he walked in school. His shoulders were level. His pace was steady and long. He moved like someone with authority over the ground he walked on, and it was so different from his daytime posture that she stood frozen for 3 full seconds before her instincts kicked in, and she followed him at a distance. She watched him crouch at the base of a large oak tree, take out a piece of paper, read it once, and fold it away. Then he pressed one hand flat against the roots of the tree and the ground around it, closed his eyes, and went very still. The air around his hand changed. There was no other way to describe it. The air shifted, the way it shifts above hot asphalt in summer, a faint shimmer that had no business existing in cool October darkness, and his eyes, when he opened them, were gold. Not the ordinary amber gold of a mid-range supernatural, the deep, molten, ancient gold of something that had existed long before the school was built, before the mountain was mapped, before anyone had thought to build a wall between two worlds. He turned and saw her before she could step back. They looked at each other across the dark lawn for a long moment. "You were never supposed to see that," he said. His voice was the same quiet voice she had heard in the library, but something in it was different now. There was weight in it, the kind of weight that comes from having made decisions that affected thousands of people. Serena walked forward and sat down on the grass beside him, her back against the oak tree. She was not afraid. She was many things in that moment, but afraid was not one of them. "Tell me what is actually happening," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told her. Not everything, but enough. The ley line, the corruption, the plan that would expose every supernatural student at Crestwood, if it completed, the faction behind it, and the fact that he had been here for 3 years, watching and waiting, and moving carefully. He did not tell her who he was, not yet. He watched her face as he spoke, and she listened without interrupting him once, which was rare, and which he noticed. When he finished, she asked one question. "Who are you, really?" He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Someone who is trying to keep this place standing," and he left it there. She did not push, but she did not leave either. They sat under the oak tree for another hour, talking about smaller things. The history project, the cold coming in off the mountain, a book she had read once, about territorial boundaries, and how they shift over time, and at no point did she treat him differently than she had in the library. That, more than anything, stayed with him when he walked back to his dormitory alone. The ritual was set for a Friday night, which Ethan knew because Marcus had confirmed it in the last note. A single sentence that said only, "East Wing Basement, 3 hours after lights out." He arrived an hour early. The basement beneath the East Wing was not on any school map that students could access. It was a storage space by official description, and it looked like one. Shelves of old equipment, broken chairs, boxes of outdated textbooks. But in the center of the room, the floor had been prepared over many months, with something that had no business being in a school. Symbols drawn in materials Ethan recognized from old council texts. A pattern built to amplify, concentrate, and then release the corrupted ley line energy in a single directed burst. He spent 40 minutes carefully dismantling what he could, without triggering the activation sequence. He removed 3 key elements. He redirected 2 energy channels. But the core of it was deeper than he could reach without activating it himself, and he did not have that kind of time. Chancellor Marin arrived with 3 people, at exactly 3 hours after lights out. She stopped when she saw him standing in the middle of the room. "Ethan Cole," she said, and her voice was almost amused. "The scholarship student. The weakest boy in the school." She looked at what remained of the pattern on the floor and back at him. "How much of this did you touch?" "Enough," he said. She studied him for a moment. Then she stepped forward and activated the sequence anyway, because she did not believe that one weak student with no measurable power could have done enough damage to matter. She was wrong about that. The sequence activated. Energy began to gather in the center of the room, building toward the release point. And then it hit the gaps Ethan had made in the pattern, and it stuttered, and it began to collapse inward rather than outward. Marin moved fast. She was not unprepared for resistance. She activated a device she had kept inside her jacket, something built to neutralize any supernatural presence within a close range, and she moved toward Ethan with the clear intention of removing the only obstacle between her and completing what she had started. Ethan let the suppression go. It did not fade gradually. It dropped all at once, like a door falling off its frame, and the room changed in an instant. There was no explosion. There was no dramatic display of fire or force. There was simply a presence, immense, ancient, and absolute, that filled the basement from floor to ceiling, and pressed against the walls, and made the air feel different in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Marin's three companions stopped moving. They had not made a decision to stop. Their bodies had made it for them, the way a body steps back from the edge of a great height, without waiting for the mind to agree. One of them went to one knee, then a second. The third pressed against the far wall, and could not seem to make his legs respond to his intentions. Marin herself did not kneel. She was not wolf-blooded, and the instinct did not run in her. But she felt it. The way you feel a thunderstorm before the first sound reaches you. A pressure in the chest. A knowledge that something much larger than yourself has entered the room. Ethan walked toward her. He caught her wrist gently, stopping the device from reaching him, and he looked at her with an expression that was not anger and not triumph. It was something quieter than both, something that looked, if anything, like sadness. "You built all of this," he said, "to destroy something that was never broken." He dismantled the remaining sequence in 3 steps that would have taken the council's best technicians an hour. He deactivated the device in Marin's hand with a touch. He instructed the 3 individuals in the room, not asked, instructed, with the quiet authority of someone whose word functioned like gravity in the presence of wolf-blooded beings, to remain where they were until the council's representatives arrived. They could not have disobeyed if they had tried. Marin he left standing. She was no threat now, and he felt no need to treat her as one. The ley line beneath the school settled. He could feel it, the wrong vibration smoothing out, the rhythm returning to something natural. The convergence point was intact. The exposure event would not happen. He turned toward the door. Serena was standing in the frame, her arms at her sides, her face very still. She had come on her own, following the same instinct that had taken her across the east lawn 4 nights before. She had seen everything from the doorway. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "You're him, aren't you? The Alpha King." It was not a question. Ethan looked at her across the room. The gold had faded from his eyes, and he had pulled the suppression back up to a level that felt manageable. Not the complete wall it had been for 3 years, but something more honest. He nodded once. She absorbed this. Then she turned and walked back up the stairs, and he followed her, and they did not speak again until they were outside under the open sky. By the next morning, Crestwood Academy looked exactly as it always did. Students moved through the corridors. Someone had placed fresh flowers on the front desk. The cafeteria smelled like toast and coffee, and the usual table arrangements had sorted themselves out by the time breakfast was half over. Vance held court at the center table, telling a story that was making 6 people laugh. He did not notice the closed door of the vice-chancellor's office. He did not notice the 3 unfamiliar vehicles parked at the far end of the staff lot. He did not notice anything unusual, because nothing about the surface of the morning suggested that anything had changed. Ethan walked into the cafeteria at 7:45. He got his tray. He walked to his usual table, the one near the back window, beside the shelf of old paperbacks no one ever read. He sat down and opened a book, and began eating his breakfast, in the quiet, unhurried way he had been eating breakfast for 3 years. 2 minutes later, Serena sat down across from him. She set her tray on the table. She poured milk into her coffee. She did not say anything for a moment, and neither did he. Around them, the cafeteria moved at its ordinary pace, plates scraping, chairs pushing back, the background noise of 200 young people at the beginning of an ordinary Friday. "So," Serena said finally, "what happens now?" Ethan turned a page in his book. He thought about the question, the way he thought about most things, carefully, from several angles at once. The council representatives would be at the school within the day. Marin would be removed quietly. The ley line was stable. His work here was, in one sense, finished. He looked up at her. "Now," he said, "I have to figure out how to fail Monday's combat assessment convincingly." I cracked the sparring mat last month. The instructor hasn't noticed yet, but it's only a matter of time. Serena stared at him. Then she laughed, short, real, and completely startled. And the sound of it was so ordinary, in the middle of everything that had happened, that Ethan felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not relief, exactly. Something smaller and quieter than relief. Something closer to the feeling of being, for once, in a room where he did not have to hold everything at a distance. She looked at him across the table with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth, and for the first time in 3 years, someone at Crestwood Academy was looking at Ethan Cole and actually seeing him. Not the ghost. Not the Omega. Not the king hiding beneath the surface of the school's lowest-ranked student. Just him. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he went back to his book, and she went back to her coffee, and the cafeteria moved around them at its ordinary pace. Loud and warm and perfectly, beautifully unaware of what had happened the night before, or of who was sitting quietly at the table by the back window, or of what it had cost, and what it had meant, and what it might, in time, become.